Hello and welcome back. This is going to be a collective reading today, and the title of it is You're Pulling Yourself Through the mirror into the upper realms, into the paradise realm, whatever you want to call it, out of the construct, into the new earth, something like that. So let me explain why I'm seeing that on the table. First, I'll say the way that I do these collective readings is I take three decks. So I have the Marseille Tarot deck, which is about 400 years old, the Rider-Waite, which is about 100, and the Vox Arcana deck, which is brand new. And I've merged those three because it gives me like a past, present, future kind of vibe. And now I have the Major Arcana in one pile, the Court card in another pile, and the Minor Arcana cards in a third pile. So I'm pulling one major to see the archetype that we're dealing with, one court card to see what role we're supposed to play, and then three minor arcanas just to give us an idea of action steps. So the archetype that we're dealing with is the Hanged Man from the Marseille deck, or called Le Pendu. And what's interesting about this Hanged Man is that it almost looks like he's positioned between the Two of Wands, right? Which is about broadening your horizons, expanding the map. The Two of Wands is almost about, like, imagine finding a wing of your home that you didn't even know existed, right? We've all had that dream where, like, you accidentally find a secret room or something like that. But I'm getting the impression that it's like the room isn't fully rendered yet, right? Imagine that. Imagine finding a space that hasn't been fully rendered. And I'm honestly seeing, like, if you look at the back of the Marseille card, right, how it looks like this checkerboard pattern. It almost reminds me of Photoshop, like when something in Photoshop is not rendered and it's just this pixelated screen, right? Almost like the Masonic checkerboard, right? That's what they're implying, is that they're projecting onto an unrendered reality. They're scripting over it. So that's what I think we're doing. But with the Hanged Man aspect, the upside down, it's making me literally think of the upside down, like Stranger Things, which I've never actually seen, so I don't want to use that analogy exactly, but it's reminding me of a movie from years ago called As Above, So Below. And it was a horror movie, but that's irrelevant. But it was almost like one of those Blair Witch style movies where they film it on an iPhone. And the gist of the story is that it's about this group of teenagers that go into the Paris catacombs and accidentally stumble into the underworld, right? So smash that like if you've accidentally gone into the Paris catacombs and wound up in the underworld. And what's interesting is that when they get there, it's like everything kind of flips upside down, right? And the final sequence of the movie is there's like a storm drain on the floor, and they have to push the storm drain down to open it, and then when they go through the storm drain, it's like they come up on the Paris streets. I don't know if I'm describing that right. Like, imagine it's a hole in the floor, and when you go through the hole, you're actually coming out the hole like that, or something like that. So that's what I think we're like in the middle of right now. And that's why I think things are very confusing right now, because it's like what used to be down is now up, what used to be left is now right. And even those things are being thrown out of the window, right? It's like things are going quantum. And what we've noticed as well is that it's like objective reality no longer exists, right? Everything is very subjective right now, which can be terrifying, but it's also like the ideal time to kind of project onto things. So like I said, like as we're going through into this new space, for whatever reason, the space is not fully rendered, right? Maybe it is a brand new space or something like that that we're being uploaded, downloaded into or something. And the role that we're supposed to play in all of this is the King of Wands from the same Marseille deck. And the King of Wands, I often refer to as the Imagineer, right? That's what they call people that work at Disney. You're an Imagineer. And somebody like a Walt Disney would be a great example of King of Wands archetype, simply because he was a world builder, right? He didn't just make a product, he built a world. And I know, Disney's problematic, so I'm not saying that we should glorify that, but that's just the example, right? Another example would be Tolkien with Lord of the Rings, or J.K. Rowling with Harry Potter. Anybody like that that really does a full kind of world building, imagination, scripting type of thing. That's what the King of Wands is, right? It's like in Hollywood, the King of Wands would be the director, right? It would be somebody that really kind of brings the vision together, that directs the imagination, directs the vision. So that's what we're being called to do as we move into this new space, is like project onto the blank space. And what I found in my own history of manifesting is that it's like that's the most ideal time to manifest, is when you're in a situation, like let's say you're in a script with other characters, right? But you don't know what's happening off stage. All you see is what you know, right? So if you haven't spoken to people, you don't know if progress is made, you don't know what steps they've taken, where they're at. And 9 times out of 10, it's like we'll kind of fall into a fear space, right? Of starting to worry and what if and this, that, the third. And then we start rendering that reality because we're projecting it onto the unrendered space. It's basically like holographic universe theory, right? The idea that like something only exists if you observe it, right? As soon as you leave the room no longer exists, right? It just goes back to being pixels or something. What was that? The double slit experiment, like kind of proved that, or something like that with quantum theory. So that's what I'm seeing again with these two cards, that we're going through this flip and that we're being called to kind of project onto this new space, which is coming up as the Three of Pentacles. And this is talking to me about New Earth. I think this came up in another reading where it's like, these are the polarized realities, right? Light and dark. We don't really want to be in either of the polarized realities. We want to be in the quantum, right? The fully integrated reality, because both of these kind of can only exist with the other. But this is where things can actually be ideal, right? And it kind of goes back to Star Wars. The Star Wars mythos is that like in the beginning, when there was like the golden age of the galaxy and everything was cute and Jabba the Hutt was friends with everybody, there was only the gray Jedi. And then somebody had the brilliant idea to split into the light, which created the dark, and then we had all the problems that we had in Star Wars. So the ultimate goal of the Star Wars mythos is to like reintegrate the two and become the gray Jedi again, so that there can be peace and blah blah blah. For us, it's like our shadow is not, the P. Diddy's of the world. Our shadow is, the aspect of ourselves that we've suppressed or put into isolation because we didn't think it was good enough, right? So for most of the people on my channel, it's mostly feminine. So for a lot of us, it's the masculine energy. For whatever reason, we've rejected or suppressed that, and then that becomes the shadow. For a lot of masculines, it's the feminine, right? So if a masculine has artistic interests or creative, gentle interests, whatever is associated with the feminine, that gets suppressed and becomes the shadow, right? So it's just a matter of integrating those things into ourselves. And it's also aspects of ourselves that we're not exactly proud of or fond of, right? So it's like there's been many times in this matrix where I've played the role of a barista, right? I don't really identify with that, but I was still in there, right? I was just wearing a costume and a mask, but it's like there's still a part of me in that kind of needs to be integrated into this new reality. And I do think that a lot of us have stubborn fractals that are nervous about this transfer, this transition that we're making, because those fractals think that they're being left behind. But what's really only being left behind is the mask, right? The actor and the wisdom that they have is coming into this reality with us. And that's another aspect of what I'm seeing with this Three of Pentacles, is that it's almost like the energy is being extracted from these realms and like siphoned into this third pentacle, right? Which is like gestating in this womb up here almost. And you can kind of see what I'm saying, right? Where it's almost like extracting it and dripping it back in, almost like a distillation process. And one thing that's really interesting in terms of what I'm talking about with the flip and the upside down and going through the mirror is that the next card in the sequence is the Two of Cups, right? So you can see here clearly that this Two of Cups from the Vox Arcana deck is one individual dealing with their reflection. And you can see how these cups are kind of like pouring into one another, right? So this is where I'm seeing like the extraction or pulling yourself through the mirror or reclaiming yourself, something like that. And it's reminded me of this analogy that I've been working with. So I drew out this little map here that you can see. So this white pyramid on the top and the black pyramid on the bottom. This white pyramid on the top is what I call the original construct, right? It was supposed to be, this particular process where you can, build your soul up and blah, 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 and go through all of these great things and basically advance yourself, right? But something happened where it's like this realm got pulled into a mirror. So instead of going up and up and up like this, we kept going down and down and down, deeper into darker territory, right? But ultimately, it's like you're supposed to reach the apex of the holy mountain here and break out of the construct, right? So that's hermit card energy, being over it, not in it, or in it, not of it, the out of phase space, the quantum realm, the Merkaba, the Metatron, whatever you want to call it. It's like this is the Neo, whatever. It's like you reach the apex of the holy mountain and then you get your multipass and you can move about the construct, right? So this is like out of the construct. Everything inside of the circle is in the construct. This is outside. But instead, it's like we got pulled into this shadow realm, this underworld that was just a reflection in the mirror of the holy mountain. And we were never able to actually make it to the out of phase space. We just kept looping, right? It's like you'd reach what almost felt like the summit, and then you'd go right back to square one, and you'd reach the summit and go right back to square one. At some point in the last couple of years, we reached the summit. I think we all reached it at different times, but it's like it officially crystallized on the eclipse. That's what I'm thinking. Like something happened at the eclipse that made this official. And when that happened, this flipped. And because this is just a reflection, the shadow is just a reflection of the holy mountain, what we wound up in is this kind of divine out of phase space. But the problem with the holy mountain is that it's been occupied by imposters, right, who are currently being thrown off the mountain, right? So Google P. Diddy, if you don't know what I'm talking about. The imposters are being thrown out, and it's like we are the card-carrying members, right? We have the permit. The purple heart that I've been talking about is the same idea as the permit, right? That allows us to occupy this space. But again, it is very much so like an out of phase, awkward space that's kind of unrendered. It is like a new reality, but that's at least what I'm seeing. And again, it's like we're doing this fractal extraction process that's just bringing all of these aspects of self back in. So I think one thing that a lot of us are being encouraged to do is like openly invite those things into the circle, right? Like send out the invitation to those things, let those aspects of ourselves know that they're invited into this new experience, that they're not being left behind, right? Like no aspect left behind is very much so the energy of this, of what I'm seeing here. And what we're being encouraged to do is project idealism onto whatever it is that we're seeing, right? So it's like, for example, I was talking about the energy of like subjective reality versus objective reality. And if I said this already, I'm so sorry if I'm repeating myself, because of course I've recorded this 12 times. But when it comes to this, right, if you look at it from the Kabbalistic perspective, they typically talk about the pillar of severity and mercy, right? Light and dark. But in the middle of those two pillars, there's a third pillar, which they often call the hidden pillar or the pillar of beauty. And the pillar of beauty is hidden because you can only see it if you appreciate it, right? Beauty is subjective. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You are the beholder. So right now, our reality, there's no such thing as objective reality anymore, right? Everything is subjective, and that can be terrifying, and it can encourage us to project nightmare scenarios onto it because it's such foreign, unfamiliar territory. But it's actually like cosmic fertilizer, right? And one analogy that I'll use for the space that we're in right now is that it's like imagine like a dozen people standing around a pool, and each person is throwing stones into the pool. Each stone is creating its own waveform pattern on the surface of the water, right? The surface of the water. Eventually, well, at first it's just going to look chaotic, right? Because everyone's throwing in their stones of all different sizes, there's splashes here, and it's just chaos on the surface. Ultimately, the largest stone that's thrown into that water is going to create the dominant waveform that eventually organizes the pattern on the surface of the water, right? So it will go from being chaotic to orderly based on which stone has the greatest mass or impact or whatever you want to call it. You are the greatest, most impactful stone in your reality, period. Period. We're all powerful, but in terms of your personal reality, it's you. non-negotiable. That's just the way that I feel about it. And so that's when it comes to like projecting onto your reality. It's like, what waveform do you want to create on the surface of that water? Do you want to binge watch all of the CNN videos that make your blood pressure go up and fight as if you're on the panel? Or do you want to tune that out and just focus on what it is that you would like to see play out of this, right? Quite frankly, it's like, do you even care about any of the things that people are talking about right now? Is that even part of your reality? Is that even something that you have to negotiate with, right? Most likely no, right? So that's effectively what I'm seeing with that. And then the final card in the sequence here is the Two of Pentacles. So this is kind of showing me that it's like in the future, it's like once this integration process is complete, there's this moment where it's almost like taking a standing leap out of the water. It's giving me like a Free Willy vibe. If you've ever seen the movie Free Willy, right? Where it's like, I think the final sequence of the movie is like the whale finally like jumps out of the water and jumps over the jetty and finally goes into the ocean, right? And makes this kind of like big splash. That's effectively what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing it as, again, like this Hanged Man energy finally completing this rotation and just like jumping out of the water. And I know there's a card, there's a Hanged Man card that shows up in some of San's readings where she talks about, it's like the Hanged Man is kind of doing a standing leap from where he is and performing this miraculous feat. And the Hanged Man talks about activations that are induced by pressure, right? So it's a pressure-induced activation. It's a birth process, right? This is supposed to depict somebody being pushed through the birth canal, right? That's why his head is usually crowning, right? So, and the standing leap is telling me that it's like, I'm just going to throw a date out here for the sake of it, but it's like, I think there's something happening towards the end of the summer, whether it's July, August, I'm not really 100% sure, but I feel like whatever initiated during the eclipse is just kind of like a holding phase. Maybe it's the rotation phase, right? Where we're just kind of like waiting to complete this rotation and then we just take off, like something like that. And again, it's like, I feel like it's happening within the next month or so, that we're just kind of recalibrating or getting used to this realm. Or if you want to use the video game analogy, it's like when you level up in a video game, when you're first introduced to that level, you're typically, there's like an introductory film at the beginning of the level that introduces you to the new map, the new characters, the new tools. And I think that's what we're doing right now. But again, it's like everything that used to be up is now down. Everything that used to be left is now right. And quite frankly, it's like, I think left, right, up, and down are being thrown out, right? Because we're moving from binary to quantum. What does that even mean? I don't know. So that's why I think it's impossible to really, there's no, it's like a map with no, what would you, signage? What do you call it on a map? A map with no compass, maybe? A map with no key? It's like you don't know which way is north, south, east, west. You don't really know what anything is. It's like, that's why it's hard for us to really kind of project right now, because there's no signage, right? And overall energy was the Eight of Swords, right? So Eight of Swords is navigating without a GPS, effectively, without a map, without any kind of indication of where to go, but just kind of intuitively winging it, right? So that's why it's kind of saying, like, I think a lot of people are easily pulled into fear right now because nothing is certain, but it's almost a good thing, because that's going to work in our favor ultimately, this subjectivity and all of that. So I want to say that there's no extended for this reading, but if you're interested in an extended of your own and want to know in terms of what it is that you're trying to manifest or anything, let me know. That's in the description box below. It's $20 for a like 10-15 minute voice note, so just about as long as these. And one question that I've gotten a lot, because I do these in a lot of readings, is what is your superpower, right? So if you're interested in knowing your own superpower, we can do a reading like that. But of course, whatever question you're interested in. And then I also do long form readings as well if you're interested in like a Zoom reading where we can talk for an hour and then we can just go over whatever needs to be gone over. But again, instead of an extended, I'm just going to offer that. And let me see if there's anything else that I want to pull out of this. So again, it's like, I do feel like we're in the of extracting or distilling our spirit from these realms, anything that was trapped in either the as above or the so below, the polarized realities, because ultimately we want to be out of it, right? Because we made it through the bottom of the underworld. We came out, we wound up in this out of phase space. This space is the same as this space. The imposters are being thrown out of the holy mountain, and we're separating from this reality altogether. It's like, I think eventually this is going to separate and just be its own thing that's not even touching this. But maybe that's what's happening after July. I'm not really sure. But I think the ultimate advice in terms of this Two of Cups is to, again, like, consciously, actively invite those aspects of yourself in that might be afraid, right? Because I do think that there's aspects of ourselves that are afraid that they're not included in this. And it reminds me of a clearing that I had done around, a friend of mine is trying to sell their house. And we had done a clearing just because I knew it was haunted, just because the whole neighborhood is haunted. It's terrible. There were orphanages, and go figure. So the house was haunted by these children that absolutely love her. Love, 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 love her because they feel safe around her. But it's toxic because they love her to the point where they never want her to leave that house ever, not even for a minute. Nor do they want anybody else in that house but her. So you can imagine how stressful that's been, right? But it's hindered her movement, right? These fractals that are absolutely terrified of losing her have hindered her movement, right? So that's what I'm seeing, where it's like there's fractals of ourselves that are afraid of losing us, that think that if we level up, oh, it's almost going to make me cry. You know what I'm saying. Because it is the energy of the inner child. And yeah. Whew. But again, it's pulling in that unconditional love, right? It's reminding those things that they are worthy. I don't think I'm going to be able to finish this anymore. But I think you get it. So you are in this process already, right? It's like, I do want to say that you're already in this process. It's not like, what do I need to do to initiate it? What you're in it. I think everything that we're talking about here is just going to make it a little bit easier. I don't think that quite frankly, I don't think there is anything that's going to be left behind. Like, anything that truly does belong to us or is of source, whatever you want to say, is going to be extracted from that shadow realm. But the thing about the shadow realm, right? So the underworld, I'll go back to that analogy of as above, so below, which was the movie that I was talking about in the beginning, where they go through the underworld, and then as soon as they get to the bottom, it's right side up, right? Which is that hanged man energy. It's like flipping. And that entire movie was about passing through the fear threshold. So for each of the characters in that story, they all experience different things in the underworld based on their own fears, their own regrets, their own shame, whatever. And it's like, that's how the fear threshold works, right? It's like, it pushes your fears towards you. So for a lot of us, like for me, it's like, my final boss in the game is not, if it was like literally a boss, it wouldn't be a boss that's like an a-hole to me, because that's a very easy situation to leave. It's like, oh, you're going to be rude to me? Great, thank you. You've expedited my process. But if somebody hits you with the woe is me, that's the hardest one. That's the hardest one, right? So it's like, I think we're beyond that at this point. We're good, but I'm sure a lot of you have probably experienced the same thing, where it's like the empath's curse, right? Of knowing how much we contribute to certain situations, and knowing how we are just like, our presence is holistic, right? And it's like, we only want the best for everybody, but we do still need to continue kind of moving, right? So it's like, I see movement happening in the future. I know that it's going to be this kind of standing leap, free willy kind of experience once everything is embodied. Because again, this is Two of Pentacles, right? So Two of Pentacles talks about physical material, right? Physical embodiment. But the Two of Pentacles is also very much the energy of quantum entanglement, right? So another advice card that I'll give is that, in terms of integrating, right? Because we want to integrate and invite things into, or not invite things, but ourself, fractals of ourself that need to be reintegrated into the greater self. All of those things are being invited in. And I heard a quote recently that was like, they who keep a clean house are expecting company. So there could be like a little doing around that where it's just like, almost like what would you do if you were preparing for a dinner party? Right? So imagine that you have a dinner party coming up where it's all of your other aspects of self that you're inviting back in to the greater self, right? And maybe just have a little fun with that, whatever it needs to be, and and the flip side of that is anything I want to get rid of when I take out the trash, right? That's what I'm getting rid of. I assign the thing that I'm letting go of to that. And we're not letting go of the fractals of self that played these roles. We're letting go of the mask. We're letting go of the costume. We're letting go of the script that's now obsolete, right? But the person, the actor, the heart, the energy, that's coming with us. And yeah, it's like I think the tears were coming up because it's like we look back on those things with a degree of disdain sometimes, right? It's like my barista self, I look back on, my years at Starbucks 100 years ago. I There's, a part of me that doesn't look back at that proudly sometimes, right? Because it's not exactly a great achievement, but ultimately it really was a great achievement because I was just a kid and it was a scary job and I held it down and blah, blah, blah. And it taught me a lot of really valuable things. And I guess it's just recognizing that where it's like there's no mistakes, only lessons. Everybody did, all of our roles were Oscar worthy and we did a great job. And now it's time to just move into this next phase as a complete self. So thank you guys for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you at the next one. And again, if you're interested in an extended or anything like that, hit me up. Otherwise, thank you again for the likes, subscribes, everything. The algorithm is going to see me eventually. It's going to see all of us, and we'll be on top of this game, okay? But we flipped out of it. We're moving into the new earth or something like it. And that's that on that. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye.